I stood there on my front porch, holding the bright yellow envelope like it was a live grenade. Notice of violation, unauthorized structure on community recreational land. That was the first line. The second line made my blood boil. You have 72 hours to remove your dock from Crystal Pine Lake or face daily fines and possible legal action. I laughed out loud, because if I didn't, I was going to scream. The HOA wasn't just overreaching this time. They were trying to evict me, from my own dock, on my own land, on the lake I owned. What they didn't realize, what they had never bothered to check, was that Crystal Pine Lake wasn't part of their community. It wasn't a shared amenity, or a public park. My grandfather had bought the entire lake, and the surrounding 80 acres of forest, back in 1961. It was private property, mine now. But none of that stopped the Crystal Pines Homeowners Association from claiming otherwise. Their arrogance was staggering, and this letter was the last straw. For months, they'd been edging closer, first, with passive-aggressive comments at the mailbox about bringing the area up to visual standards, then with complaints about my log cabin being too rustic for the neighborhood vibe. But trying to take my dock? That was war. I'm Nathan Carter. I used to be a civil engineer in Denver until I got tired of deadlines and traffic and deliverables. My fiancée broke off our engagement 6 months before our wedding, and suddenly city life had nothing left for me. That's when I packed up, drove west, and moved into my grandfather's old place by the lake. The cabin was rough, but peaceful. I rebuilt the dock myself, board by board, just like he had done decades ago. I fished in the mornings, chopped wood in the afternoons, and fell asleep to the sounds of loons echoing over the water. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. All of it. Including the lake. I didn't know what the HOA was playing at. Maybe they assumed, like most people, that lakes automatically belonged to the neighborhood. Or maybe they knew full well and were trying to bully me out of my rights. Either way, they had just made the worst mistake of their suburban careers. Because I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to bury them in the very lake they thought they controlled. I didn't waste any time. After reading that letter for the third time, I snapped a photo of it and forwarded it to my lawyer friend, Dana Patel. Dana and I had gone to college together. She specialized in property law now, mostly helping rural landowners deal with boundary disputes and aggressive developers. If anyone would know what kind of game the HOA was trying to play, it was her. She replied within the hour. They can't do that. Unless they have a deed or a legal easement, they have no say over your lake or the dock. Send me everything you've got. So I did. The deed, the property survey, the land use agreement from 1983 that clearly stated the lake, shoreline, and dock fell entirely on my private land. My grandfather had made sure of that. He was a man who didn't trust authority, and he'd paid a lot of money back then to get ironclad documents that couldn't be misinterpreted. Meanwhile, the HOA doubled down. The next morning, I found a final warning notice stapled to the pine tree beside the dock. A large, red-lettered sign had been planted in the ground that read, "Community area, no trespassing without HOA permit." The nerve. I yanked it out of the ground and tossed it in the back of my truck. As I was loading it, I heard a voice behind me. Well, I see you got our note." I turned to see her, Karen Bledsoe, vice president of the Crystal Pines HOA. She wore an immaculate cream-colored windbreaker, matching sneakers, and that pinched, condescending smile I'd come to recognize like the sound of nails on a chalkboard. "This lake isn't part of your jurisdiction," I said evenly, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're trespassing." Karen cocked her head, mock confusion playing across her face. "Oh, Nathan. That's not how it works. Crystal Pine Lake is a community resource. We've used it for over a decade for our summer festivals, kayak meetups, and junior fishing program. You can't just close it off because you feel like it's yours." "I don't feel like it's mine," I said. "It is mine. Legally." She gave a short, sharp laugh. "That may have been true once. But if a piece of land is used by the public for long enough, it becomes public domain under prescriptive easement. Maybe you should Google that. Oh, I had. And I knew she was bluffing. But I didn't take the bait. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, I said, turning away. Karen didn't leave quietly. You know, the HOA board has discussed removing that old shack you call a cabin, she called after me. It's a safety hazard. Not very aesthetically appropriate. And just like that, it all clicked. This wasn't about a dock. It was about everything. My land, my cabin, the lake. Karen and her HOA cronies wanted it gone or under their control. They'd been waiting for someone like me to either give up or give in. But they picked the wrong guy. I wasn't going anywhere. And I wasn't about to let a pack of entitled suburban tyrants rewrite the boundaries of my family's legacy. This was my line in the sand. And I was more than ready to hold it. Comment 1 if you'd fight back too. By the time I walked back into the cabin, I'd gone from annoyed to laser-focused. Karen's smugness hadn't rattled me, it had revealed her hand. The HOA wasn't just issuing empty threats. They were preparing to bulldoze my rights under the illusion of community enforcement. The fake easement claim, the signage, the talk of removing the cabin. It all pointed to one thing, a coordinated power grab. And I had no intention of letting it happen. I called Dana again. They're trying to claim prescriptive easement. She snorted. That's cute. They have to prove uninterrupted, exclusive use for at least 15 years. Public use doesn't even count in most states. And your grandfather filed renewal affidavits every 5 years. He knew exactly how to block that nonsense. That made me smile. Grandpa Carter always was a few steps ahead. Start documenting everything, Dana added. Take pictures, log dates, record conversations if it's legal in your state. And if they try to touch your property again, we'll go to court so fast their heads will spin. It was good advice. I spent the next few days setting up trail cameras and motion sensors around the lake perimeter, especially near the dirt path where HOA members like to slip through the trees and host their little community events. I installed one discrete camera on the dock itself and another on a pine tree that overlooked the fire pit area near the shoreline, one of their favorite illegal gathering spots, apparently. The footage I got? Infuriating. 2 nights later, I watched as a group of HOA members dragged kayaks across my property and launched them without so much as a glance toward the cabin. One woman even let her golden retriever relieve itself on my doormat before walking away like nothing happened. The next morning, someone had hung a laminated sign on my dock. Reserved for Crystal Pines HOA Kayak Club, Saturday 9 a.m. Reserved. On my dock. I took the sign, lit it on fire in the fire pit, and brewed a second cup of coffee. Then I started digging deeper. I pulled the county records and found something curious. Crystal Pines HOA didn't own a square foot of land bordering the lake. Their development stopped nearly 200 feet from the waterline, separated by a strip of forest that had always been part of the Carter property. In fact, the only access they had to the lake was through a narrow trail they'd carved through that strip, illegally. Even better, I found a record of a formal complaint filed by my grandfather 20 years ago against a developer who tried to list the lake as a community amenity in a real estate brochure. The county had ruled in his favor then. That ruling was still on record. They weren't just wrong, they were repeating history. That's when I started connecting dots. The sudden hostility, the false signage, the threats about my cabin, it was too organized to be random. There had to be something bigger going on. I was right. One night, as I reviewed a clip from the motion cam near the back trail, I spotted something that made my stomach clench. A man in a suit, standing beside Karen, pointing at various parts of the lake with what looked like a rolled-up blueprint in his hand. Plans? Development plans. And that's when I realized. This wasn't about kayaks or visual standards. This was about money. I replayed the footage 5 times, zooming in on the figure beside Karen. He was tall, wearing a tailored gray suit, expensive-looking loafers, and a Bluetooth earpiece tucked into his right ear. Definitely not a neighbor. Whoever he was, he didn't belong out here in the woods, pointing at my lake like it was up for auction. I paused the video and took a screenshot. Then I called Ray, my closest neighbor, a retired surveyor who'd lived on the ridge across the lake for nearly 40 years. If anyone knew what was going on behind the scenes, it was Ray. "Sounds like you've seen Mr. Albright," he said when I described the man. "Who?" "Russell Albright. Real estate developer. Works with Timberline Partners. They've been sniffing around the area for over a year, trying to lock down land for a lakeside resort concept. Word is, they want to build a boutique hotel, marina, even some high-end rental cabins. HOA's been cozy with him lately." My grip on the phone tightened. "So the HOA's trying to sell the lake, that they don't own?" Ray chuckled bitterly. "Welcome to suburbia, son. They assume if they bully hard enough, no one will push back. Most folks would have caved by now. I wouldn't." I spent the rest of the night digging into Timberline Partners. Sure enough, their website showed renderings of a proposed luxury getaway on Crystal Pine Lake. Infinity pool. Boat slips. Wedding pavilion. They'd even branded it, The Pines at Crystal Shore. And the best part? The development map included my dock, my cabin, and nearly all of the Carter property. They weren't planning to negotiate with me. They were planning to erase me. That explained the pressure campaign. Get rid of the guy with the deed before anyone realized the lake wasn't theirs to sell. Dana confirmed my suspicion the next day. "There's no record of any sale or pending offer on your property, but Timberline filed a zoning variance request with the county last week. They're pretending you're already on board. They're using your land as leverage to attract investors." "So they're lying to the county?" "Not exactly lying. More like omitting inconvenient truths." She sighed. "We need to act, Nate. They're laying the groundwork. Once they get investor buy-in, they'll ramp up pressure on you, maybe even try to claim you're interfering with community use." I wasn't surprised. I'd seen this playbook before. My old firm had worked on enough infrastructure projects to know how fast the development plan could steamroll individual property owners. But I wasn't some soft target. I wasn't leveraged by debt or time. I had all day, and a pile of evidence. Still, I wanted more. So that weekend, I went to the next HOA, community social, at the clubhouse, just to listen. Karen was all smiles, flitting between wine glasses and welcome signs, talking about enhancing the neighborhood's recreational potential and exciting things to come. Then Richard Gale took the mic, HOA president, former banker, and full-time snake. "I know some of you have concerns about the lake and access. Let me assure you, the HOA is working closely with community partners to ensure Crystal Pine Lake continues to serve all of you. And we're exploring options that would bring in revenue and increase property values for everyone." A few people clapped. Most looked confused. One woman raised her hand. "Is the lake ours? Or not?" Richard smiled like a game show host. "That's being reviewed. We've been managing the lake for years, so any ambiguities in ownership will be resolved shortly." I nearly laughed out loud. After the meeting, I loitered by the snack table, sipping lemonade, until I overheard Karen whispering to Albright near the back. "He's stubborn, but isolated. The board's pushing to declare his dock unsafe. If we frame it as a safety issue, the county might force him to take it down. Once that's gone, it's easier to challenge his occupancy." I had heard enough. I walked out into the cool night air, head spinning, not with anger, but with purpose. They weren't just trying to take my land. They were building a fantasy on top of it, and hoping I disappeared before the paperwork caught up. But I wasn't going anywhere. It was time to turn the tables. They picked the wrong weekend for their grand unveiling. The Crystal Pines Annual Summer Festival, a lakeside celebration with music, food trucks, and a mini regatta organized by the HOA, was scheduled for the following Saturday. According to the flyers plastered all over town and the HOA's website, the entire east shore of Crystal Pine Lake would be the event's centerpiece. The problem? The east shore was my land. They had even labeled my dock as VIP viewing deck on their promotional map. Dana, ever the strategist, was ecstatic. Perfect. We let the event happen, collect photographic and video evidence, and then serve them with a formal cease and desist during the event. Do it publicly. In front of residents. Maximum impact. I grinned. And I assume you'll be bringing the paperwork? Oh, I'll bring the whole damn filing cabinet. We spent the week preparing, printing property maps, enlarging county land surveys, organizing photos from trail cameras. Dana even had the original deed from 1961 laminated, just for dramatic effect. We also contacted the sheriff's office, not for arrests, but to request an officer be present when we served the order, just in case tensions ran high. Finally, Saturday arrived. I watched from my cabin porch as the setup began at sunrise: tents, stages, inflatable slides, and vendor booths, all on my land. Volunteers in matching HOA shirts walked freely through my yard, some even pounding stakes into the ground like they owned it. A catering truck parked itself 20 feet from my vegetable garden, and some poor teenager started unloading cases of soda next to my tool shed. By 10 a.m., music was blasting. Kids ran through sprinklers near the dock. Boats I didn't recognize launched into the water, and I counted at least 150 people milling about. It looked like a full-blown public festival. Right on cue, Dana arrived. She stepped out of her car in dark sunglasses, carrying a thick folder under one arm and a stainless steel travel mug in the other. "Ready to cause a scene?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Let's do it." We walked together across the field toward the main tent, where HOA President Richard Gale stood smiling beside Karen and a man in a blazer I immediately recognized, Russell Albright. They were mid-speech, thanking attendees for coming out to support the community, when Dana tapped Richard on the arm and handed him the envelope. He blinked, confused. "What is this?" "An official cease and desist, issued by the county court this morning," Dana said, her voice calm but clear enough to cut through the crowd. "This entire event is taking place on private property, Mr. Carter's property. You are trespassing, and this festival is unauthorized." The microphone was still live. Everyone heard it. A murmur spread through the crowd. Karen stepped forward, her smile straining. "There must be some misunderstanding. We've used this area for years." "Without permission," Dana interjected, opening the folder and showing the laminated deed to the growing group of curious onlookers. "This land has never belonged to the HOA. It was never part of your development, and you have no legal right to use it for events, let alone pitch it to developers." Richard turned bright red. "You could have handled this privately, Mr. Carter." "I tried," I said. "You stapled threats to my trees and sent developers to plan construction on my dock. You made it public the moment you printed maps with my land labeled as yours." One of the nearby vendors, clearly overhearing everything, started quietly packing up his hot dog stand. Albright was already on his phone, walking away toward his car. That's when the sheriff's deputy arrived. Not with sirens or force, just quiet authority and a copy of the court order in his hand. "I need everyone to start clearing out," he said firmly. "This event is cancelled. Any remaining tents or equipment need to be removed within the next 2 hours." Karen sputtered. "But this is a community tradition. And now it's a legal liability," the deputy replied. "Let's not make it worse." The crowd turned restless. Residents began asking questions. One woman in a sun hat marched up to Richard. "Wait, you said the lake was ours? That we paid HOA fees to maintain it? You've been lying?" He tried to recover. "We've always acted in the community's best interest." Another man shouted. "You mean your own interest? You're selling a resort behind our backs." Dana leaned in, voice low. "By the way, we've documented you using my client's name and property in promotional materials without consent. That's civil fraud. You'll want your own lawyer." Richard looked like he might faint. Within an hour, tents were coming down. Music was off. Boats were being trailered out of the water. The community festival had collapsed into a shameful exodus. And me? I stood on my dock, arms crossed, watching the east shore empty out. This wasn't just revenge, it was correction. Karen avoided my eyes as she passed by with a clipboard and clenched jaw. Albright drove off without saying a word. And Richard, he lingered, saying nothing, as if waiting for some last-minute miracle. None came. I waited until the last car left before walking back to the cabin with Dana. If that HOA takedown gave you chills, hit the like button so more people hear this kind of justice. Well, she said, grinning, that went better than I expected. We're not done, I said. Because while the trespassers had been dealt with, there were still deeper questions to answer. Like where those HOA dues had gone. And who else had signed off on this fraud. By Monday morning, the fallout had begun. Dana had forwarded the cease and desist and documentation to both the county zoning board and the local paper. The story practically wrote itself. HOA throws unauthorized festival on private land, faces legal action. By lunchtime, it was on the homepage of the town's news site, complete with a photo of Richard Gale looking stunned as he received the injunction. That same afternoon, I started getting emails. Not from the HOA board, but from Crystal Pines residents. They were furious. Some had spent years paying high HOA dues, believing they included access rights to the lake, shoreline maintenance, and community improvement, projects that never seemed to materialize. Others were just angry they'd been lied to so brazenly. By Wednesday, a group of residents organized a special meeting to demand answers. Dana and I were invited, and this time, I accepted. It was held in the same clubhouse where I'd once overheard Karen whispering to Russell Albright. Only now, the crowd wasn't sipping wine and smiling. They were armed with questions, screenshots, and a growing sense of betrayal. Karen was conspicuously absent. Richard sat at the head of the table, looking pale and 10 years older. He tried to open with a prepared statement, but was immediately cut off by a gray-haired man near the front row. You told us we owned the lake. We've paid nearly $6,000 a year in dues. Where did that money go? Richard fumbled. All finances were managed through approved community projects. Like the non-existent kayak storage? Another resident snapped. Or the security cameras that never got installed? Dana stood up and cleared her throat. For those wondering, we've submitted a formal request to audit the HOA's financial records for the last 10 years. We have legal grounds, especially if there's evidence of misappropriation. If any funds were directed toward development consulting, like Timberline Partners, we'll find it. That was the final nail. Before the meeting ended, Richard resigned on the spot. The remaining board members followed within the week. The county also launched an investigation into HOA finances after residents submitted a petition. According to one official I spoke with, several consulting payments made by the HOA to a shell company tied to Russell Albright were already raising red flags. Meanwhile, Albright? Gone. His company scrubbed all references to the Pines at Crystal Shore from their website. He'd clearly realized the land grab wasn't going to happen, and bailed before the lawsuits caught up. The best part? 2 weeks later, my mailbox contained a certified letter from the HOA's interim president, a formal apology, and a check reimbursing me for unauthorized use of private property. I didn't cash it. I framed it. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't just stopping the people who try to steal from you. It's making them pay to apologize. In the weeks that followed, things finally began to quiet down. The lake returned to what it had always been, still, clear, and peaceful. No banners. No fake community signs. No HOA, lake monitors, walking through my yard with clipboards and fake smiles. Just loons, wind in the trees, and the soft creak of my dock underfoot. But something else had changed too. The very people who once unknowingly trespassed on my land began reaching out with a different tone. Not anger. Not entitlement. Respect. Some sent handwritten letters. Others knocked on my cabin door with cookies, firewood, or, my favorite, a 6-pack and an apology. One elderly man named Paul came by to say he used to fish on this lake with my grandfather as a kid. He always said the lake didn't belong to him. Paul told me, his voice cracking slightly. He said it belonged to anyone who treated it right. That stuck with me. So I did something my grandfather probably would have done too. With Dana's help, I formed the Crystal Pine Lake Trust, a small nonprofit that offered regulated access to the shoreline and parts of the lake for locals who respected the land. People could apply for permits. The money went into actual maintenance, water testing, trail cleanup, and ecological conservation. We also held a reset meeting in the community center, this time led by residents, not board members. We made it clear, no more backroom deals. No more lies. Just neighbors trying to do better. As for the fishing club, they reformed too, this time without elitist nonsense or VIP decks. Just folks with rods, coolers, and appreciation for clean water and quiet mornings. Sometimes I still catch myself looking out over the lake, wondering how close we came to losing it all. To seeing this place turned into some plastic eco-resort, with valet parking and artificial beaches. But we didn't lose it. We fought back. And better still, we built something stronger in the process. The framed apology check still hangs over my fireplace. Right below it is a photograph of my grandfather on the dock, holding up a monster bass with that same stubborn grin I probably wear now. He always said, "You don't really own land, you're just its keeper while you're alive." Now, I finally understand what he meant. And I intend to keep this lake, for everyone who respects it, the way he would have wanted. Love stories where justice wins? Hit subscribe so you never miss the next wild HOA tale. This story reminds us that protecting what's yours isn't just about ownership, it's about stewardship. Nathan didn't just defend his grandfather's land from an overreaching HOA. He honored the legacy of respect, integrity, and quiet strength passed down through generations. In a world where entitled voices often get the loudest megaphone, this tale is a powerful reminder that truth, preparation, and patience still matter. Nathan didn't scream or fight dirty. He documented, strategized, and stood firm, and in doing so, transformed a conflict into a new beginning for his community. Whether it's a piece of land, a family tradition, or a set of values, we all have something worth protecting. And when we defend it with calm resolve rather than reckless emotion, we not only win the battle, we show others a better way forward. In the end, the greatest victories aren't always loud. Sometimes, they're quiet mornings on a peaceful lake, preserved not by force, but by wisdom. Know someone who's dealing with HOA nonsense? Share this story with them, they'll thank you later.